Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, dear friends, sisters and brothers, I greatly appreciate the invitation to a beautiful country on the occasion of the Korean publishing of my book, Afternoon of Christianity. I'm glad that some of you are also readers of my books. I have been preparing for this distant journey by gathering information about the history and present of Korea and Korean Christianity. Your church is young, but has a rich history. Christianity in your country and in ours has had many martyrs, not only early in its history, but also in recent times, especially now in North Korea. My teachers of faith went through suffering during the German occupation during the World War II, and especially in the communist prisons and concentration camps, especially in the 1950s. I also spent 42 years of my life under communist rule, but at the time I discovered the Christian faith and was preparing for the priesthood in the 60s and 70s, communist persecution was not so drastic as it has been during the bloody years under the Soviet dictator Stalin. However, the church was still unfree and persecuted. Since there was the only one seminary, priest seminary in our country, completely controlled by the communist government, I had to study theology in secret and receive my ordination in secret in the private chapel of a bishop in East Germany. Even my mother was not allowed to know that I was a priest. I worked in the underground church for 11 years. I had my civilian profession. I was psychotherapist for alcoholics and drug addicts. But at the same time, I did what the church was not allowed to do at that time. I lectured in private apartments. I gave spiritual exercises. And I was a member of a team that both reflected on our experiences and at the time and prepared a vision for the future work of the church when the situation would change. And we worked on this change together with resistance groups against the dictatorship. That's why I'm interested in the situation of Christian North Korea and China. The church in our country and in your country has been involved in the transition from dictatorship to democracy and has gained great moral authority in society. However, if it is to retain this authority and truly be leaven and salt of society as a whole, it must not retreat into a ghetto. It must not care only for itself and its members. It must take an active part in the life of the whole of society and feel co-responsibility for it. The main task of the church, evangelization, does not consist only in verbal proclamation of moral values. The essence of evangelization is inculturation, the incarnation of the gospel in the way society thinks and lives. We need to listen to contemporary culture and try to understand it. This understanding is a prerequisite for dialogue. Dialogue must avoid both cheap conformity and constant criticism or culture war. If our proclamation of the gospel is not intelligible and credible to the whole of society, then the exculturation, the gap between church and society occurs. The inward-looking church loses its fruitfulness and persuasiveness. This also applies to the political culture. The church in Europe has made tragic mistakes in the past when it has associated with authoritarian regimes. Today, we must show practical examples of the church operating in a democratic, free society. Christianity can and should be the pillar of democracy. Democracy is not only a political regime, but also and above all, a certain culture of relations between people. This culture must be constantly nurtured and deepened. Democracy and a free society can only survive and develop in a certain moral climate where people share basic moral values. Here the Church has a very important role to play. I repeat emphatically, this role does not consist only in preaching morality. Society rightly expects practical examples of empathy and solidarity from Christians, the active participation in the quest for social justice, for an open society that can integrate all. Equally important is our participation in effort to preserve creation, to care for a healthy environment. The political theology of Pope Francis, expressed especially in the encyclical Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti, offers a rich source of inspiration and impetus for our activity in society and can inspire also non-Christians and non-believers. Pope Francis speaks here of political love and social friendship. We should offer this message clearly and convincingly with practical examples to people beyond the visible boundaries of the Church. I'm convinced that it is not only Christians who are aware of this crisis phenomenon of today's society. As society becomes more prosperous, the temptations to selfishness and materialism grow. You know this well. It is worrying if young people do not have enough sacrificial love and courage to bear and raise children, and society is aging. The elderly were once an object of respect, but today many people see them as a burden. Conflicts between generations add to the many conflicts in society. Euthanasia, the killing of old and sick people, is now permitted in many countries and is seen as an act of mercy for suffering sick, can become a dangerous weapon for the liquidation of the elderly. This should also be borne in mind by today's young people who will also one day be old and will suffer from the absence of those able to care for them. Many ever-growing megapolises, huge cities, are becoming deserts. Young people in particular suffer from loneliness in crowds. I know that the suicide rate among young people in your country is very high. Suicide is often an expression of despair and loneliness. Artificial pseudo-friends on the internet cannot replace real friends. The philosopher Martin Heidegger wrote, "Technology has overcome all distances but had created no closeness." The task of Christians is to create a culture of nearness, to transform the process of globalization into a process of mutual communication, respect, and cooperation. I firmly believe that Christianity will be able to accomplish this great historic task, but it presupposes that today's church will undergo a profound renewal. I am convinced that this renewal began with Pope Francis's call for synodality. Only a synodal church, a church as a common way, synodos, can contribute to the healing of our world. At the time I was finishing my book, The Afternoon of Christianity, our whole world was stricken with the wounds of coronavirus pandemic. History has known many contagious diseases, but this was the first time it spread rapidly worldwide. This pandemic showed us, among other things, the dark side of globalization, the interconnected of our world. The era of late modernity has seen the process of globalization accelerate and deepen. The internet age facilitated the process of exchanging information and goods, transport, and financial flows. I'm convinced that globalization contributed significantly to the fall of communism. When the communist regimes, with the state-planned economies, repression and censorship of cultural life, were drawn into a global market space for goods and information, they quickly became lost in the sharp winds of competition. Technological progress has overcome the efforts of totalitarian regimes to control the circulation of information and ideas. In the 1980s, the idea of human rights became a common guiding idea among Eastern European dissidents, American foreign policy, and the political theology of John Paul II. The first visit of Polish Pope to his native country created a moral climate from which the Solidarity trade union movement was born. This movement united workers, dissident intellectuals, and the church in Poland, and was the first to break the monopoly of power of the Communist Party. This was the spark that ignited the non-violent revolutions that ended the history of communism in Europe in autumn 1989. Marx and Engels wrote in 1848, "The specter of communism is sweeping through Europe." After 140 years, the specter of communism has ended its bloody walk through European history. The transition from communism to democracy was not a bloody one in most Europe, with the exception of Romania, but was not easy. After a long period of dictatorship, society is wounded and thick. It requires a therapeutic process. Countries that have yet to see the fall of communism, from Cuba to North Korea, should be prepared for this. After the fall of dictatorship, they are former dissidents, former collaborators, and secret police confidants living side by side. There are people seeking revenge, and they are those who are morally wounded and bitter. The process of reconciliation tends to be challenging. Guilt must be confessed, called by name, and paths of repentance and satisfaction must be embraced. Christians should be experts in the process of reconciliation. In many post-communist countries, this process has been neglected. Many of the last communists have become the first capitalists. Many post-communist countries ruled by oligarchs, former communist elites, the only ones with capital of money, influential contacts, and information after the fall of communism. In many countries, nationalism is replacing communist ideology. We see this in Russia, China, Hungary, and Poland. Wild capitalism in post-communist countries is leading to major social problems. In Russia, there is an economic, moral, and demographic crisis. The Putin regime has nothing to offer its population except the drug of national messianism. Putin is the Hitler of our time. And if the West does not help Ukraine to resist Russian genocide, it will soon face serious dangers. The main reason for the Russian invasion was the Russian regime fear that the example of democratizing so-called color revolution in the former Soviet republics would awaken civil society and the desire for democracy in Russia itself. Now, however, the Russian public is in majority manipulated by propaganda and intimidated by repression, and the opposition is very weak and liquidated. What is striking is how the Putin regime exploit the Orthodox religion and the corrupt Orthodox Church. I have written a book about my experiences during the pandemic called A Time of Empty Churches. It seems to me that the closed churches were a kind of prophetic warning sign already in many countries, especially in Europe. Many churches, monasteries, and seminaries are emptying and closing. Unless the church undergoes a real reform, especially a deepening of spirituality, it may that soon most churches will be empty. On the other hand, the time of closed churches has also brought good experiences in some Christian families, where all members attended church regularly on Sundays. They read the Bible together for the first time during the lockdown. They talked about their faith, sharing their spiritual experiences and difficulties. In this way, in their families and small communities, these small house churches, they experienced the synodal church the common way. In times of pandemic, as usual in times of calamity, they were dangerous preachers, heralds of an evil, vengeful God. They immediately interpreted the pandemic as God's punishment, usually punishment for the phenomena they themselves has long unsuccessfully condemned. God thus became the extended arm of their animosities. In the Gospel, we see Jesus rejecting such theology, refusing to see blindness as a punishment for the sin of the blind man or his parents, refusing to see the victims of misfortune as a greater sinners than others. During the pandemic, I did not look for God as the agent of the misfortune, but rather found him in act of helping love and solidarity. Where there is goodness and love, there is God. We sing on Monday, Thursday. The place where I most intimately encounter God in our world is act of faith, love, and hope. In this trinity of virtues, I see what is typically Christian, the union of the divine, God's grace, with the human, with human freedom, because there is no virtue without freedom. The only place in the Gospel where Jesus is explicitly called God is when the Apostle Thomas, the patron of doctors, touched Jesus' wounds and exclaimed, "My Lord and my God." Thomas saw God through the window of Jesus' wounds. Are not the pains of our world, including wars and pandemics, the wounds of Christ who took up our crosses? If we ignore the wounds of our world, we still have the right to say, "My Lord and my God." Jesus calls his disciples to try to understand the signs of the times. The Bible recognizes two kinds of time. Greek, the mother tongue of New Testament, has a different word for each. Linear time, which we measure with watches and calendars, is called chronos. In addition, there is the word kairos, that refers a time of opportunity, a time for something. In the book Ecclesiasticus we read, everything has its appointed time, and all events under heaven have their time. There is a time to be born and time to die, a time to plant and time to pluck, a time to kill and time to heal, a time to tear down, a time to build up, a time to weep and time to law. Ecclesiastic chapter 3. The task of biblical prophets was not futurology, predicting the future, but rather kairology, the interpretation of current events as the speech of God. Often, therefore, the prophets came into conflict with the public opinion of their surroundings. When many Israelites were assured that there was peace, the prophet said, "There is no real peace." When the Israelites in Babylonian captivity were sinking in their minds, the prophets brought them hope, comfort, and encouragement. In my books, I try to diagnose the time spiritually. I take seriously what the analysis of the social sciences, especially sociology, and work of arts, especially literature and film, say about our times. Theological analysis, however, presupposes a contemplative approach to the reality, meditation, prayer, freedom from ideologies and prejudices, and the union of the logic of reason with the logic of the heart. Kairology, the theological interpretation of contemporary events, must distinguish between the signs of the times and the spirit of the times, zeitgeist. The spirit of the age includes public opinion, fashionable opinions, and ideologies. It is the language of this world. The sign of the times is God's speech through the world's events. It is only in the sanctuary of conscience that we hear the voice of God and can distinguish it from the noise of the world. Problems can be solved by mere rational analysis. To solve them is to be done with them. The contemplative approach goes deeper into a realm of mystery. We can never be done with mystery. Mystery has no bottom. It invites us to ever new and deeper interpretations. We read of Jesus' mother in the Gospel that she kept everything in her heart and reflected on it. Mystery must be kept in the heart and allowed to grow and mature there as an embryo grows under the mother's heart. My book, The Afternoon of Christianity, is an attempt to understand our times in the context of the history of the Church. I apply to the Church history the metaphor that Carl Gustav Jung, the founder of depth psychology, used to interpret the dynamism of individual life. Jung likened childhood and youth to a morning, followed by the midday crisis, a midlife crisis. Those who pass through this crisis are ready to enter the afternoon of life, a time of maturity, an opportunity to deepen the spiritual dimension of personality and gain life with wisdom. I have likened it the pre-modern era, the time in which the Church was building its institutional and doctrinal structures to the morning of the history of Christianity. The confrontation with modernity and secularization, a time for shattering many traditional religious certainties, is the midday crisis. Even the current shaking of the credibility of the Church, following the revelations of large number of cases of sexual, psychological, and spiritual abuse, in the Church belongs to this time of crisis. And now, in my opinion, we stand on the threshold of a new epoch, the afternoon of Christianity, a period of maturity, of Christian wisdom will not come automatically. It will require transformation, reform, and spiritual deepening. I see Pope Francis' initiative, the call for synodal renewal of the Church, as a possible path to depth and an afternoon more mature Christianity. The synodal Church, the common journey, must deepen not only the communication with Church, but also a deeper communication and a deeper and wider ecumenism. Ecumenism is a form of Christian love. It is necessary to walk together with Christians of other churches and deepen sharing with believers of other religions and with spiritual seekers on the periphery and beyond the borders of religious communities, societies, and cultures. And then the challenge, go to Galilee, there you will see him. Nor are we to look for Jesus in the past, but in the present. We too are to look for the Galilee of today, where we will meet Jesus. Christian experience consists in the adventure of seeking the risen Christ today, in the Galilee of today. The risen Christ is unreconcilably changed. Even his nearest and dearest could not recognize him. I'm convinced that the Galilee of today lies beyond the visible boundaries of the Church. According to statistics, a large proportion of your country's population professes no religion. In our country, it is far greater percentage. Why it is this so? I don't believe that all these people are spiritually blind or deaf. I recently led an international research project, The Faith and Beliefs of Unbelievers. The word of the unbelievers is just as diverse and colorful as the word of the believers. It includes agnostics and apatheists, the people, they are apathetic, indifferent to religion. However, outside the visible structure of the Church, we can also find many sincere spiritual seekers. If we are to enter into dialogue with them, we cannot approach them as owners of the truth. Only Christ can say, I am the truth. We are not Christ. We are only followers of Christ, disciples on a journey of following and learning. The Church is still on the way to the fullness of truth, on the way to its eschatological goal. The Holy Spirit is at work in the Church, always bringing us into the fullness of truth, into the fullness of Christ. The encounter and dialogue with spiritual seekers can also help us to discover Christ even more fully and deeply. Christ can also come to us sometimes as an unknown pilgrim, as to the disciples on the road to Emmaus. Our hearts and minds too must remain alert, open, searching. Pope Francis is saying, God is everywhere, and we must know how to find him in all things. Yes, there is still an area of uncertainty in this quest to seek and find God in all things. There must be. If a person says that he met God with total certainty and it is not touched by a margin of uncertainty, then this is not good. For me, this is an important key. if one has answers to all the questions, says Pope Francis, that is proof that God is not with him. It means he is a false prophet using a religion for himself. The great leaders of the people of God, like Moses, have always left room for doubt. You must leave room for the Lord, not our certainties. We must be humble. Abraham leaves his home without knowing where he was going, by faith. Our life is not given to us like an opera libretto, in which all is written down, but it means going, walking, doing, searching, seeing. We must enter the adventure of the quest to meet God. We must let God search and encounter us. We must trust God. So speak Pope Francis, the great prophet and spiritual leaders of our time. We will come back to this topic tomorrow. So I think we are perhaps now at this crossroad, and that will come this time of the afternoon of Christianity, the time for maturity. Jung says that in human life could be also bad afternoon. So when people are only repeating this task of the morning, if they want just to enrich their property, their career, and so on. We can also have this bad afternoon of Christianity with nostalgia for the past, and just want to return to this old structures and so on. But it is dangerous to have this nostalgia, to look only back. We must look forward. When Jesus first met his future apostles, the fishermen, it was early morning and they were very tired. And it is perhaps not the proper time to speak with these tired fishermen. But Jesus told them, go to the deep and try it again. They said, we have our nets are empty. We have catch nothing. But Jesus said, go to the deep and try it again. Today many fishermen of people, so some priests and bishops say, oh, we are in the same situation. We have empty hands, we have empty nets, we have empty seminaries, we have half-empty churches. But Jesus says also to us, go in the depths and try it again. If there are many priests and local churches are so tired, and I say, we must go to the deep and try it again. Try it again, it doesn't mean to repeat the old mistakes. So I think this afternoon of Christianity, this new epoch, is the new chance to go deeper and to renew our faith and our Christian life. So we need to deepen our spiritual life, we need to deepen our theology, and we need to deepen our activity in the civil society also. So, and this is my personal story. So in the time of communism, this secretly ordained priests have a very special rules from the church. It was forbidden for us to speak about that we are priests to our families, especially the non-believers' families, because there was a danger that the whole network could be discovered by a secret police or something. My parents were some of the secular humanism, very, very moral, very ethical, but with no contact with the living church. It was typical for the intellectuals in our country that they have some respect to Christianity, they have some ethical values, but they have distance from the church. And the church was practically withdrawn from the public space, so there was possible to celebrate the Mass, but nothing more practically. No contact with especially with the young people and so on. In this official church, there were also some agents of the secret police. So we cannot, we must be very cautious if we can trust those priests in the official. But still, I've got some possibilities when I work as a psychotherapist. I've got some possibilities to bring people more to Christ without saying that I was a priest. But I'm very grateful for this experience from this communist time when I worked as a civil profession, because I knew the lifestyle of people, the style of thinking the people. And after the fall of communism, when I started to work publicly in the church, and I had the parish, the academic parish, so I baptized in the 33 years after the fall of communism more than 3,000 adults. So I think that Putin is really the Hitler of our time, and he is really the war criminal, and what is now in Ukraine, it is practically the genocide, because they are murdering not only the soldiers but the civilians. They are bombing the schools and killing the children and so on. It's really a great crime. And it is scandalous that this hierarchy of the Russian Protestant Church is really openly supporting Putin. But we know that the Patriarch Kirill was the agent of the secret police, and now the documents are revealed. So he was practically the colleague of Putin from this KGB, from this secret police. So they are, and Putin is using and misusing the religion for this. So I hope they are also the Christians, they know how the situation is and they are not supporting, but the public opinion in Russia is so manipulated. It's similar like in North Korea, and the people have practically no access to some free media, and they have the brainwashing of the propaganda all the time, and they are using especially the nationalism, the Russian national messianism, when the nationalism, which is the national egoism, is connected with religion. For centuries, there is this very dangerous Russian messianism. That's the idea that the Russian nation has a special mission to save the world. In the West, there was always some distinction between the political power and the religion and the church. But in the Byzantine Eastern Christianity, there was the unity of throne and altar. In Russia, there was this unity between the Tsar and the church in the Tsarist time. And it's interesting that even the Stalin persecuted the church drastically. But during the German invasion in the Second World War, the Stalin realized that the Russians are not prepared to fight for communism. And so he used the Orthodox Church to support this Russian army, and he named this is the war for the nation. It is not for war for communism. So in the war, sometimes the Russian Orthodox priests accompanied the Red Army with the icons, and Stalin promised the liberty to the church during the war, but after the war he continued this persecution. I will speak about it also tomorrow. So this evangelization is the inculturation, and we should proclaim the gospel, the faith, adequately to our environment, in dialogue with the really needs of the people. Yes? Sometimes the priest during the preaching, he asked, and he said, and now we will put a question, and he puts the question which nobody asks. He knows already the answer, and we must find the real problems of people, the real question of people, and to try to answer the real question of people and the real needs of the time, of the concrete society. Not speak just abstractly. When I was in India, I spoke with one Jesuit. He came as a missionary to India, and he told me, I went through 3 periods. The first period was the childish, infantile reaction. I was so stressed by this poverty and with the social situation, and I must escape. It was the childish reaction. And then came the reaction like the puberty, like the adolescence. We must find, we must make a revolution. And then the third was, I must stay here and work with patience. So, and he said, I needed the meditation. I needed the culture of to going deeper, to meditate about it. And in the meditation, I was able to work on it, to develop it from this infantile and from this to the mature. And he said, the 2 persons that really changed the spiritual face of India, it was Gandhi and Mother Teresa, both people of prayer, of adoration, of meditation. So we need the meditation, the culture of meditation, to have the power to withstand the situation, not to escape, not to react with violence, but to be faithful and to go step by step to work, to help the people and so on. So we need this maturation through this courage to work also even in the very, very demanding situation. We need to combine the contemplation and action. The action without contemplation could be dangerous. We need this contemplative, deeper dimension. Yeah. But contemplation without action is also, we need also these fruits, practical fruits of the contemplation.